meantime, we're going to have, of course, production cars for the next round of the Yokohama Australian Championship to come. That's after this break. 20 laps the distance this afternoon at Amaroo Park Raceway, one of the tightest layouts on the National Trail. Let's take a look how they'll line up for this afternoon's round of the Australian Championship. Garry Waldon has pole position in the Mazda RX-7, sharing the front row. Peter Fitzgerald in another RX-7 from 3, car 4, Jim Zerefos, a Commodore. From 4, car 50, Mark Gibbs in the Bridgestone Commodore. From 5, 11, Michael Preston, another Commodore. From 6, 25, Roland Hill's Commodore. From position 7, car 16, Alan Fender. From 8, car 2, Bradley Jones. From 9, 77, John Bourke. And rounding out the 10, Peter Dane in the Yokohama Commodore. Top field, 25 drivers this afternoon to contest round 4 of the Yokohama Australian Championship from Sydney's Amaroo Park Raceway. Garry Waldon, pole position, timed in yesterday with a 58.56, sharing the front row. Peter Fitzgerald, yesterday's time 58.98.
Garry Waldon won the previous round of the championship, but as far as the overall point score is concerned, Mark Gibbs is the leader, and it's pretty tight at the head of affairs too. This is the 4th round of the series. Gibbs, the series leader, on 30 points from Mike Preston on 27, Peter Fitzgerald on 27, then Garry Waldon on 20.
Shouldn't be too long before we have a start. Race Cam, of course, will be bringing you pictures in this event from one of the Commodores, Mark Gibbs' car. But the fight up front should be really something to watch. Walden versus Fitzgerald. Ready for a start? Racing, round 4 of the Yokohama Australian Production Car Championship. This time it's Garry Waldon gets away. Look at what's going on behind, though, as one forces Alan Fender coming up here in company with Preston. They've picked up Roland Hill, and there's a little bit of door banging going on as they reach the top of Skyline for the first time.
Mike Preston really had to work pretty hard then to keep Fender's mobile out. Gibbs on the outside here of Peter Fitzgerald, getting a little sideways, but quickly sneaks back across the road to try and take some of the tar away from Jim Zerefos.
It's a good break for Garry Waldon, got off the line beautifully. Some of them doing some zigging and some zagging as they come down to Power Plus corner. This time that we pick them up at Honda. Garry Waldon running for Goodyear, out in front from Peter Fitzgerald. Mark Gibbs is the next one to come through. Mike Preston still trying to fight his way through the pack in company with Roland Hill and Alan Fender.
The Mazdas have been exceptional in the last couple of rounds of this championship, particularly Garry Waldon's. Incredible times from them. Qualified yesterday in a 58.56. Oh, and Brad Jones has been tangled up there with the second Goodyear Commodore. Not the first time they've tangoed this year.
Looks like Brad trying to get the Valvoline machine out of the way, which he does. But I tell you what, that's not the best part to park at Amaroo Park. Make no mistake about it. It's right on the line. Let's have a look at the recap. NEC replay. Oof, he just didn't turn. Came back and nailed Brad Jones. They're at 6s and 7s behind, though.
How everybody else got out of that with, well, relatively little damage is remarkable. One of the lasers went in.
Tell you what, it won't be too bad for the race leaders as they come around here, but the pack behind the leaders are going to have to watch themselves.
Pow.
I've got a feeling that may have all started a bit earlier than that, somehow. John Bourke got around, he jumped into the grass and got through there cleanly.
Certainly plenty of traffic congestion. There's Brad Jones, Valvoline Starion facing the oncoming traffic.
Going back to the Oran Park production car race, so it would have been a couple of months ago. I know that Stott and Bradley tangled and there were a few words exchanged. And I had the misfortune of following Mr. Stott on practice on Friday, who doesn't seem to watch his mirrors very often.
Garry Waldon. Well, there's Stott's car. He's decided after sitting it out there for one lap, it's not the place to park. So he steps over the wall, the car sits there. The drivers will pass that point of the racetrack under flags, hopefully to lessen the chance of contact with the back of the car as they come through this turn. As you can see, there's Fitzgerald going through. Mark Gibbs is the next one through. Michael Preston going through, so too Roland Hill and Alan Fender.
What, half a car's width wide there, and you'll end up in his boot.
So Garry Waldon, the Goodyear Eagle-sponsored Mazda, heads through Dunlop Loop and now onto the back straight. got a good lead build up, using all of the racetrack too.
Garry Waldon, 35 years of age in the Mazda, and it's going so much better now. Second in this series 3 times, so this year is very important to him. He was the winner of the production car race at Bathurst. Done very well in the last couple of national title races with 2 first placings and first in this year's series today. Garry Waldon, he'll be much happy with the performance of his car now with the Barry Jones 13B peripheral port turbo Mazda engine on board. Barry's done a great job to get this car really functioning. We've mentioned a couple of times earlier this year that Pete was always the enemy of the Mazda. Mark Gibbs really using plenty of road that time. And now the results are coming Gary's way after well, a pretty tough season.
As Peter Fitzgerald runs second in the Yokohama-sponsored car, also happens to be the sponsor of the series. Fairly important for Pete that he gets up and does the right thing. They've opened up a bit of a gap over Mark Gibbs in the Commodore. There's Mark coming through, then a gaggle of Commodores back behind him. Fitzy in the Mazda.
Mark Gibbs, the best of the Holden brigade, and there's plenty of them out there today. He's got a fairly good lead now over Jim Zerefos, and Zerefos heads off a battle that includes Mike Preston and Roland Hill. There's the gap. You'll see him doing battle.
Yeah, I think this is where the interest is in the race at the moment.
Michael got very close to the back of Zerefos when they went through the stop corner that time, and they've all just stretched out a little bit heading up the straight, and tagging along in the Advans entry is Roland Hill. I've seen him doing very well in production car racing in the last couple of seasons. Jim Zerefos, you'll recall, probably 2 or 3 seasons ago now, was running a laser very successfully here and had a season away from production car racing, and has now come back this year in a full challenge in the Goodyear Turbo Commodore. Carried our race cam last time. The Commodore boys are really wondering at the moment what they're going to do about the performance of the 2 leading Mazdas.
Yeah, it's become apparent, hasn't it, the last couple of races, that the Mazdas are getting the wood on them, race by race. Here's some of the picks as we take race cam from Gibbs' car. This is coming up to where Stott's car is still parked in the fence, so you'll notice drives it in here, floats the tail out, so there's not too much there. There's not much I can do about it either, he tells the crew.
That's right. I'm doing everything I can. Gee, didn't he look very relaxed behind the wheel? It was all happening gracefully for Mark Gibbs.
He's quite a talent. His young Mark, aged 30, has his own spare parts business here in Sydney. He started, I guess, about 1984 in production cars. He had a V8 Commodore, and he's done things like, I think he was the 84 Bathurst Rookie of the Year. He went on and cleaned up in the Laser Series. I think he was second in that. Won the 86 Stallion Stables Series in a V8 Commodore, and now he's doing a great job in his Turbo Commodore.
There's a case of the lurches under brakes. Now there's the Mazdas running away, Walden and then Fitzgerald. There's Mark going through.
I don't know whether you noticed, Pete, how smooth he was on race cam. Very, very gentle on the car.
Yes, I think that's partly the tuition of Ron Gillard, who has really hammered that home to Mark Gibbs and to the other driver in his charge, Michael Preston. The idea in production car racing is to keep the cars moving very smoothly, not screw up the rubber, as Peter Dane illustrated. Peter's usually a very smooth driver too. I think he's under a bit of pressure from Jim Zerefos there.
Well, Jim's dropped back a couple of slots in all that, and just behind him I had a glimpse of John Bourke in the Toyo Supra, who's really finding life pretty difficult at the moment against the Turbo Holdens and the Turbo Mazdas after running so well here last season.
Yes, production car racing has certainly turbocharged country this season.
Isn't everything? Mike Preston has really only got to deal now with Roland Hill. Seems to have got rid of Zerefos. There's John Bourke, Brian Hilton Toyota, fuel-injected Toyota. Sort of in amongst a whole bunch of turbo Commodores at the moment.
A beautiful, beautifully handling motor car is the Toyota Supra. And when it gets some horsepower via a turbocharger later in the year, I think it'll be right back in there.
The other thing you have to say about John's cars is they always look fantastic. I don't think there'd be too many production cars out there that are as well presented as this car.
No, full marks to Brian Hilton Toyota up there on the Central Coast. Brian's a great rally man from way back and obviously quite prepared to put a few dollars into production car racing.
Phillips getting right in behind at the moment in car number 55. I wonder what happened to Jim Zerefos, because he seemed to have, he's dropped the best part of 200 metres off the cars that he was involved in. Now he's being rounded up by Bourke. Well, his hand's out the window, so he must have a problem. Phillips goes through. Well, that's disappointing for him. So Gibbs still in third, chasing the two Mazdas. Then Michael Preston, Roland Hill, Alan Fender, Peter Dane, and then this car, John Bourke.
Phillips getting a little closer now as they come up Bitcher Pave. Not much in them as they waltz over the top. The Skyline, drop down into Dunlop Loop.
Always looks worse from here, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? Looked like an attack of the curbs coming up, and he's bounced over one there and wound up on the outside. Lost a bit of ground in that manoeuvre. So Bourke is able to keep him in check. Meanwhile, our leader is, of course, Garry Waldon, the Goodyear Eagles Mazda. Coming across the start-finishing line, Jimmy Zerefos in the pits, ready to step out of the car. Hasn't really been the race for Jim today after doing so well last time out here. They've covered half distance, 20 laps the distance for round 4 of the Yokohama Australian Production Car Championship.
We haven't seen too many failures from the Commodores all year. In fact, last year, there rarely see any turbo Commodores off the side of the track. Be interesting to see what happened there. This is a very handy lead that Walden's built up. Seems to have just had the edge all weekend on Peter Fitzgerald. Fought pretty hard in the earlier race today. If anything, it would seem as though Peter's car is just sliding around a little bit more than Gary's car.
Peter, of course, the defending national champion. Last year, it was just one race for the championship. This year, a series across 5 states. And this category of racing really booming.
So I don't know what the Mazda drivers can come up with to... there wasn't much in that from Mark Gibbs, let me tell you. To keep running away from the Commodores, but they've done that in the last couple of rounds.
No, I was talking with Ron Gillard earlier today, and he said that here, as is the case at most circuits, all you can do is hope that they run into problems. Of course, reliability with the Mazdas is now not a problem as we go back to Mark.
Interesting stuff, this. So the guy just seems very easy on the car and happy with the way that it works. Strokes it along nicely, nothing violent happening.
Of course, the tyres, they've done 10 or 11 laps now. The tyres wouldn't be at their best. But Mark's doing a great job taking care of the tyres because they're, as we've commented so much earlier, they're only street tyres, buffed back to a couple of millimetres to keep the heat out of the tread. With a full tread, tyres squirm around and generate a lot of heat, and production car drivers overcome that by scraping the tread surface off.
I notice he sort of, and I guess it's a trait of these types of cars, Pete, he turns in and then catches a fairly long, lazy lurch from the car with almost neutral amount of steering on. It was interesting watching him go through the very fast corner at Power Plus last time. You'll see it again. Makes the run down towards there now. It builds up quite a lot of speed down here.
Yeah, this is the fastest corner on the track, yet he does it all very lazy, all very controlled.
See, look, he turns it, now has to sort of correct the whole way around, brings it, it's just an initial throw, and then he fights it the rest of the way. It's interesting. In fact, he's going to be a busy lad very shortly because Michael Preston's closing the gap, and so is Roland Hill. So he might just be fighting slightly slippery tyres at the moment.
What we would like to see is the gap closes between the first and second place Mazdas. the natural rivalry between Peter Fitzgerald and Garry Waldon really compounded this morning during that heat race, when there was a little get-together coming onto the main straight, and then words were spoken, and the stewards demanded to see two drivers front centre, but no charges laid, but obviously a little bit of feeling, and I got the word that officials would be watching their little dice very closely today. So far, though, no fireworks.
Well, that was helped, of course, by the fact that Walden got off the line in the 20-lap championship race. This morning he didn't, and he had to fight Peter Fitzgerald all the way. Peter at one stage had the widest Mazda in town.
This is becoming a real battle.
Yep, this is shaping up to be probably the interest in the second half of the race, is Mark Gibbs.
Ooh, gee whiz. Feeler gauge stuff from the side of Michael Preston's car. In fact, I think he's made contact by the look of it.
Roland Hill doesn't want to be left out.
He's going for the draft as well.
And now Mark's starting to concentrate pretty hard on that rear vision mirror. It's the shocking feeling having somebody right there.
So Mark Gibbs trying to defend here.
We'll
Third
see.
place against Preston.
See how smooth Mark can remain under pressure.
Yes, he can be quite fiery at times.
This is helping Roland Hill quite a lot. So now the difficult part for the fella being chased is that he's got to tighten up all his lines a little bit and probably drive a bit more on the defence, which you see him do there. He moves across to more like the middle of the road rather than the wider line into the corner to keep his speed up, and all that does is enable the other guy to get closer.
Roland Hill won out of that encounter. He got it up on two wheels and cut the infield as well, so he's on the outside here, but doing it hard against Preston.
I wouldn't go through the next turn side by side. There's a car on the exit. Thank you.
Well, they both get past the chicane there, heading up Bitcher Pave.
Could be the fastest bit of parallel parking of all time.
Once again, they're dropping down into Dunlop Loop. Mark Gibbs holding off Mike Preston and Roland Hill. And they're coming up on a slower car.
The meat in the sandwich, Mike Preston, he hasn't been in motor racing very long. Began in 1985 in those Wild and Woolly Geminis in Queensland. Won the series in 86 and then came on to production car racing, and he's really making a good fist of it. Been right in every one of the championship races so far this season.
That was quite a lively smokescreen, Jim.
I was going to say they should thank all the tyre manufacturers for aiding putting some rubber back into the circuit. Okay, they've gathered up the back marker.
Lap 15 of 20. Oh, Roland Hill. It's very sideways.
You see, Preston was sitting on the back bumper 2 laps ago of Mark Gibbs. He's not there at the moment, though. Mark's got his second lease on life, heading up the hill. Dropping down into Dunlop Loop again. Brake lock up there from Gibbs. But look at this stage. It was all overrunning going into the turn, then had to wipe off a bit of speed on the way out. So Mike Preston lunges again at Mark Gibbs. And Roland Hill seems like he's on the freight train with the freight cars out of control.
It's one thing for Mike to catch Mark. It's another thing to get by. And he's just put an extra couple of feet in that margin again. Meanwhile, the leaders are sort of shooting over the top of the hill, so they're generating what's rapidly becoming a half-lap lead.
Pretty exuberant use of the tyres. Of course, in previous meetings, there has been a 4-tyre rule involved in production car racing. All the drivers were required to use the same 4 tyres through qualifying and into the race itself. That rule, after much opposition from the drivers, was scrapped at Adelaide the last round, and now there's a freedom of tyres, and full marks to Cams for seeing sense on that. At Adelaide, I think you recall, tyre wear was so dramatic they wouldn't have got anywhere near through qualifying in a race on 4 tyres.
No, we mentioned down there that just the circuit is so fast and there are so many parts of the circuit where you're leaning very hard on the car, and it just seems to chew the rubber up on almost all types of motor vehicles. And that was shown out in the touring car race particularly. This is a great scrap, these three fellas. The absolutely flat stick, nothing in it. They all make little gains in a couple of different places around the track, but the net result is nose-to-tail racing.
The fight hasn't gone out of Preston, though, I'm sure about that. Every time he thinks he's just on the bumper there, Roland Hill arrives underneath him. Just keeps his mind back on the job. Could Roland get any closer?
No, but if he's going to make a move, he better make it soon. It's not this race is
we're nearly
running to a conclusion.
It's almost payday.
Payday being $7,800. Not a bad little earn for these boys.
Very healthy, and Yokohama have done a great job to inject some prize money to the series. There's Garry Waldon, race leader, just winding up past Drew Price, car 78, in the little Peugeot 205.
On their last lap. Great to see Garry Waldon finally enjoying a degree of a success in production car racing, particularly with this car. They had heating problems with it early part of the season. They were able to cure that.
And Garry now very keen to secure a touring car drive in the endurance races later in the year, as is just about every driver out there.
Yeah. Out of Honda Quarter down to the lake for the final time. Meanwhile, the thrills continue back in the pack for third. Roland Hill, Michael Preston, and of course Mark Gibbs. Last corner coming up though for Garry Waldon, giving the call out. Goodyear Eagles going to take him home to victory. And Garry Waldon wins round 4 of the Yokohama Australian Production Car Championship today at Amaroo Park Raceway. Second spot, of course, will go to Peter Fitzgerald, looking for the scrap now for third, as coming along the short straight to the last right-hander, Mark Gibbs, able to fend off Michael Preston and Roland Hill, and that's the way, in fact, they will finish. Over 20 laps here this afternoon. A great win to Garry Waldon, very popular driver, and I don't think anyone is going to put the wood on Walden here at Amaroo Park in the supporting production car series as well for the rest of the season. He seems to have it all together. Acknowledging the flag marshals. So Garry Waldon doing it for Goodyear, and he's come up a winner this afternoon at Sydney's Amaroo Park. We'll be back with you in just a moment.
And Garry Waldon, congratulations again. Not only a win today, but now the leader at the halfway mark in the series. 4 big rounds to go, though.
Yeah, I'm very pleased.
I'll bet you are, but hard work.
Very hard. I'm very sweaty. Very sweaty.
The Commodore guys, and I know Mark Gibbs is standing behind you, nodding in agreement, have got to find something else if they're going to make a fight of it for the rest of the series, because Peter and yourself, the Mazdas are going so well.
The Mazdas are the car to have, Gary. I think Peter, with a few more months' development, will be very close to myself. But the Commodores, I think, are outdated.
I guess everybody was a bit lucky to escape that car that was parked up against the wall in the main straight, because it was a pretty nasty incident.
It sure was. I didn't really know what happened, but I think it must have been the second lap or so.
Third lap, I think.
Third lap, was it? Yeah. I'll probably slowed lap times down a couple of tenths, but everyone had to do it, so it didn't matter much.
Well, it certainly slowed Chris Stott down. He just spent the rest of the race on the other side of the wall, but as you said, it left a lot of debris on the track as well.
Actually, I was worried about a puncture, but as it turned out, I think it was okay.
Adrian Nash is here from Yokohama to do the honours.
Thank you, Adrian.
Congratulations on a flawless win this afternoon. You made it look so easy.
Thank you.
On behalf of Yokohama Performance Tyres, we'd like you to accept this trophy as a in recognition of your efforts this afternoon.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank Yokohama again very much. They've supported Group E racing now for quite a few years, and I'm very pleased to be associated with the series. But thank you, Goodyear Eagles, for bringing me all the way home.
Congratulations to Garry Waldon, winner again, also to Peter Fitzgerald, second, and Mark Gibbs, third. Great racing in the Yokohama series once more.